Philip and I are attending a potluck dinner this evening, and I need a dish to bring. So I'm taking my favorite chicken and rice that's sure to please a crowd. Hey friends, it's Barbara Sue at Kowalski Mountain, and welcome back to the homestead. So tonight we are attending a potluck dinner with some friends, and I wanted to think of something. I actually wanted to do something super easy that I didn't need to heat up or anything, but I've been to potlucks like that, and sometimes there's main dishes lacking. And I decided not to be that person. So I am making a hot dish. Now, chicken and rice is a great meal to stretch for a lot of people, and it's delicious. Now, we grow our own chicken here at Kowalski Mountain. So I have a whole chicken here that we're going to cut up and make some chicken and rice. Now, our homegrown broilers weigh in from between 5 and 9 pounds dressed out. Now this little bird is almost 7 pounds, and Philip and I can get about 4 meals out of a single chicken. Now, one thing I do when I know I'm going to be cleaning a chicken like this is I go ahead and I clean the sink really good first. So that sink was cleaned. I wiped down the whole sides and made sure that if I put my chicken down in the sink, that wasn't going to be a problem. Now we're just going to dry this off a little bit. And we're going to cut this chicken up. Now, when I'm cutting up a whole chicken, the first thing I do is just slice down the breast. And there is a little bone in here, and you want to cut along that edge. Now, I'll be honest, and I am not great about cutting this super well. Now, I'm also going to cut right here the skin. And here we have 1 chicken breast. Now Philip and I can get an entire meal out of just one side of this chicken breast. Now we're going to do the other side. So we're going to go along the other side of that bone. Trying to catch that little, there we go, all that cartilage. We're going to cut away from that. And there is a second chicken breast. So that's 2 meals. Now the next meal that we'll get out of this is the legs and thighs. So to do the thighs, I flip the chicken over. I put my hand right here, which there's a joint right here. We bend the leg back. And that pops the joint right out. So now I'm just going to cut here. And I cut between the bones. You don't have to cut the bones themselves, just between. And there we have a chicken thigh and leg. Now I'll cook that as one piece. You can piece this down into thighs and legs, but I don't bother to do that. Now we do the other side. that bone. It's not necessary to cut the bone. You can cut between them. There we go. And there we go. So there is another large meal. Now the last of the meal is from the trimmings. And because I don't cut this as cleanly as I should, I will go back and clean it up, and we'll use all this meat in today's chicken and rice. You might have noticed that my chicken didn't have any wings, and that's because I piece out the wings when we do the butchering, and that way we can use wings as a meal where we're going to have a whole bunch of them, and we can use those separately. Now I've got off of this chicken as much as I'm going to get. Now all of this meat came from just the trimming, so there is quite a bit of meat here to make another meal. Now the last thing I would do with my chicken carcass is make chicken broth, and I don't know if you can hear the hum of the generator today, but today is not a good solar day, so I am not going to fuss with this today. I have plenty of broth on hand, but normally that would be something I would do. Now if you want to learn how to make your own chicken broth, I have a video right up here. If you have planned ahead, you can use leftover chicken for this. And you need 2 cups of cooked chicken. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut up enough of this chicken to have 2 cups. And we're going to cut these into bite-sized pieces. Now as I'm cutting, I'm looking for any pieces that I don't want in my chicken and rice casserole. Maybe I trimmed too close to the cartilage. I can cut that out because I don't want anyone to have a chewy chicken and rice. Now here I got a little bit of the skin. I'm going to cut that off. Now yes, I hear trouble meowing at the door. And I tried to tell him that he did not want to go outside, but he did not listen. And because it's very muddy outside, I would have to wipe his paws and wipe his whole body down. And so right now he's enjoying the consequences of his choice to stay outside. I'll let him in a bit. All right, so we probably got a cup just from the trimmings. Now we're going to use the tenderloins. And the tenderloins are those little pieces on the bottom of the breast. They kind of separate. And so this is a really good use for that, because when you're using the chicken breast in cooking, it kind of separates anyway. Now our absolute favorite chicken recipe is Parmesan chicken, and that is coated with a Parmesan breading, and I don't like that separate piece. Now I'm almost 2 cups. I'm not going to be stingy with my potluck chicken, so I'm going to cut a little bit more here. This piece here is destined to be Parmesan chicken. Now, like all of my recipes, I keep them in my Recipe Keeper app, and it's very versatile because I have an iPad and an iPhone. I can see my recipes on both platforms, and I like to use the iPad in the kitchen because it's got a bigger screen and I can see it a little bit better. But having it on my phone is super versatile. I always have it with me in the grocery store if I want to look up a recipe and make something on the fly. Now for today's recipe, we need 2 cups of cooked rice. And this is another part of the meal that you could plan ahead earlier in the week. When you're making rice for another meal, double up and make enough rice for your chicken and rice. Now, I didn't do that, so we're going to be making it today. I'm going to be making my rice today with broth, and I have some turkey broth that I've made. And when you're measuring out your rice, if you need 2 cups of cooked rice, you need 2 cups of liquid and half that of the rice. So 2 cups of broth to 1 cup of rice. Now rice is super easy to make. You bring it to a boil, you add your rice, and then you turn it down and stir it till it's done. Super simple, takes maybe 20 minutes. And so I don't use any fancy equipment or Instapot or anything. I just do it on the stove because it's so easy anyway. Now in this other skillet, I'm going to cook my chicken. Now the broth has come to a boil, so we're going to add the rice. Now I stir that really well. I keep it covered and I have it on about medium heat. And all throughout the cooking, I'm just going to kind of stir it and kind of keep my eye on it. Now my chicken is just about done. And as this cooks, I'm getting the rest of the ingredients together. Now my chicken is done, so I'm going to go ahead and take it out of the pan. And I put that to the side and just going to stir my rice. Now you can cook your rice in water if you prefer, but the broth is going to give it a richer flavor, which we want it to be tasty. In the very same pan, I'm going to go ahead and add some butter. Now I don't like to use processed soups in my chicken and rice, so I make the thickener of my chicken and rice using what's called a roux. And a roux is simply a mixture of fat and flour that causes the liquids to thicken up. So I've got some butter in there. Once that melts, I'm going to add an equal amount of flour to my butter, and we're going to mix that up to create the roux. Alright, it's about there. So I'm going to go ahead and add my flour. And this is my fresh ground flour that I ground in my Nutri-Mill Harvest Grain Mill. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of thyme. Now let's get this thickening. Now I used ground thyme today, which is not my preference. I actually prefer to use leaf thyme, but that's what we had at Walmart. Now first I'm going to add a cup of broth. And you can see that thickening as I stir. This is why we made the roux. I have to say I'm not liking this green color for my potluck chicken. Now before I add the milk, I want to check on my rice. Still doing just fine. Let's add this milk. We're going to add that the same way, adding a little bit at a time, stirring as we go. Now in my next Azure order, I'm definitely going to order some leaf thyme because I don't like this ground thyme at all. Now I have a couple more seasonings to add. I'm going to add some salt. And some pepper. And I add that to the roux or to the cream soup mixture because it's easier to spread throughout rather than waiting until I've added the rice and the chicken. I've turned this burner to low until my rice is done, but I still want to stir it. This is basically a cream soup that we've created for the chicken and rice. Oh, I need to apologize to Trouble. Do you remember when the cat was meowing? Well, during one of my breaks where I turned the camera off, I went ahead and let the cat in. It was Roz. It was not Trouble. So he heeded my words that he had to stay out if he went out. Because he insisted on going out in the rain. So it was Roz. She was the troublemaker today. Now because I'm using fresh ground flour, I do keep it in the refrigerator to make it last longer. Or once you grind wheat into flour, it begins to lose its nutrients really quickly. Now I did an entire blog post all about using fresh ground flour and the cost analysis of the difference between fresh ground and store-bought. And in there I talk about the loss of nutrients that occurs once you grind flour. So if you want to know more about that, check it out below. The rice is a little crunchy, so I'm just going to add a little bit more broth. Not very much because it's almost there. Alright, since the rice is almost done, we're going to go ahead and add the rest of the ingredients. So I'm going to add my chicken back. And I have some peas here. You are supposed to defrost them first. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It'll be fine. So my rice is done. We're going to go ahead and add that. Now even though I used white rice, that looks like brown rice. And that's because of the rich homemade broth that I used to make it. Now we're just going to stir all this together. Now the next step is to bake the chicken and rice, and I do have a topping to add to it first. And normally when I make this here at home for just us, I put the entire skillet right in the oven. I use a 1-pot meal to, okay, I use 2 pots. Who's crying? Oh, it is you. Trouble decided he wants to come in. He's gonna wait. Consequences here. Normally I would use just the 2 pots. I'm like 1 for the rice, 1 for the chicken, and that's it. But today, because we're going to a potluck, I want a dish that's, for one, more user-friendly to take with me, that has a cover. So I am going to transfer this to another dish. Now the next step is to add some breadcrumb, which I use my homemade breadcrumbs, and I also sprinkle it with a little Parmesan cheese, which makes it delicious. Now this potluck is this evening, and today is still morning. I don't know, probably 10 o'clock. And so I'm not going to put the topping on it now because I don't want it to get soggy, but I'm going to put this in the fridge and I'm going to bake it just before we leave. This makes a delicious meal to feed a crowd. Now I'm putting this recipe into the Kowalski Mountain subscriber library, and all subscribers get access to my family favorite recipes. So be sure to click the link below if you want the full printable recipe and access to our entire recipe collection. Well friends, thanks so much for cooking with me today. I hope it inspires you to make a homemade meal for your next potluck. As always, we really appreciate you watching, especially to the very end. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.